hopes that my previous video was saved on the phone, because so far I can't find it, but sometimes it pops back out. I don't know. I made a rather long video, and I brought a lot of very important points, and it disappeared. So anyway, and it's kind of spooky that how this video disappeared. And the ironic thing is that, sometimes when someone calls you in the middle of making a video, it interrupts the video. Sometimes the video gets saved, and sometimes it doesn't. And this is a friend of mine who will agree with me in everything that I'm saying, who called me, and it wiped out this video, or hopefully didn't wipe it out. We'll see what happens. I was about to get to the point that we could discuss and make a separate video on this. Antisemitism. What is this term antisemitism? What's it all about? It's really a misnomer. It's a term that I try to eschew. I try to avoid. I understand that colloquially it's used. The proper term is sinus Yisrael, the hate of the Jewish people, of Judaism. And it's really essentially rooted in hatred for God. But we have to first separate what is this term antisemitism. The term antisemitism presupposes that Jews are a race regardless of their religious views. Sinus Yisrael explains that no. Yisrael means the people who are aligned with God. Doesn't mean the country Israel in the Middle East. It means that God's covenanted people. And if people who might be quote-unquote racially Jewish, even though there's no such thing, we explained this in this previous video, that essentially someone who was born Jewish and becomes an atheist is no longer Jewish. They're not a Gentile, but they're neither Jew nor Gentile. They're non-Gentiles, I guess, the way how sometimes we refer to Gentiles as non-Jews. So the formerly Jewish heretic is a non-Gentile, but it's not Jewish. But they're worse. They're infidels. They're kofrim. There's no sin being a Gentile, but to be a Jewish infidel, a Jewish heretic, a Jewish apostate is a horrible sin, and removes one from one's Jewish identity. In reality, in truth, this term anti-Semitism presupposes that Jews are a race who come from the children of Shem ben Noach. The son of Noah is Shem, and so that's where we have this term Semite to mean from the sense of Shem. And so it makes it about the bloodline, about lineage. But the fact of the matter is that anyone from any race, could be black, white, Chinese, whatever, and if you decide the Torah is true and you can go through conversion with a bezdin, a mikveh, for a man it's a bris, whether it's a tapistam bris or a full bris, depends if obviously they have to be circumcised either way, unlike what some of these heretical groups will claim. And then you're 100% Jewish. It has nothing to do with your race. It has to do with your religion. Judaism is a religion, not a race. And it really, in a sense, the convert who's pious is much more Jewish than the leftist, atheist, communist, Zionist, Frankist, Marxist, Sabbatean, so forth, Erev Rav people who are not. And it's not anti-Jewish to point out that these heretics are destroying the world. That these formerly Jewish heretics are destroying the world. That's not anti-Semitism. And or even if it is quote-unquote anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism, it's a moot point. Who cares about somebody's race? It's racist to have this whole idea that there's a difference of the Jew by virtue of his birth. That's, and this whole concept of Jewish identity that's based on birth without belief in God and belief in the truth of God's word in the Bible, the Torah, that's racist in itself, And recently, I feel somewhat vindicated, but not 100%. There was a question about there was a poster in Hungary against George Soros. Now, George Soros is the, if you would look at the comic book villain like Lex Luthor or something like that, that's George Soros. Maybe even worse. He's an arch super villain. He's one of the most evil people in the world. Now, it's not quote unquote anti-Semitic to point out that this self-hating Jew, and it's not just because of his stance on Israel that makes him a self-hating Jew, that's what Israelis want you to think, but he undermines everything, and he uses his money and power to undermine everything that the world needs. He is the epitome of evil, and it's not anti-Semitic to point that out. In fact, it's anti-Semitic to support a man like that. And the same thing, many famous people who claim Jewish identities, who are neither Jew nor Gentile, who are formerly Jewish heretics, who come from Jewish ancestry, and who are heretics, these people, it's not wrong to point out how evil these people are, whether it's Rothschilds, whether it's Soros, whether it's Bernie Sanders, whether it's Netanyahu, any of these people. I mean, Netanyahu, he puts on a show and he puts on a yarmulke to try to say, oh, look, what the Bible says, this and that, and he's an idiot. He's not a Torah Jew. So, he's a cult leader. Recently people were pointing out that a certain very controversial and to say the least, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Eccentric rabbi unfortunately died. It's possible he was killed by the Zionists. He was worried about this for a long time. He drowned. This very eccentric and weird rabbi, and people say he's a cult leader. If he's a cult leader, Netanyahu is a million times worse a cult leader than this Shlomo Helbrand. I mean, I know people who had nowhere else to go, and he really gave them what they needed. It's not for me, it's not for most people, his type of community, but for certain people that's what works. And again, so the Zionist media would spread all kinds of lies against him and claim child abuse and all kinds of things, totally unfounded, with no proof, and just the opposite. People who I know were part of his community, acquaintances of mine. And again, it's not for most people, certainly not for me. But this rather eccentric character, to accuse him of being a cult leader, the real cult leader is someone like Netanyahu. These other types of people, I mean, who have led so many Jews to their death by waging wars and so forth, so that going against the Torah. They're much worse abuse, than all of the Zionist leaders throughout history. Goldie Meyerson, who calls herself Kodamayer, to try to make herself, she's ashamed of her heritage and things, these type of things. They were horrible people. They were cult leaders. And there's Sabbatean who says it's not anti-Semitic to point this out. Do anti-Semites sometimes do this? Yes. And most people who point these things out might be suspected of what we call quote-unquote anti-Semitism or anti-Judaism, but it's mostly the fault of the pious Jews for not educating them of what Judaism really is a religion, not a race. And if pious Jews would stand up more and educate the world, we would solve a lot of these problems. We could build bridges, make peace in the world, because we have a lot more in common. Pious Jews have a lot more in common with pious Christians and moderate pious Muslims than we do with people who just might be our cousins, possibly, they claim so. And who cares if they are or not? Blood is not what matters, but rather faith and integrity in life. That's what really matters, and not these bloodlines. The reason why a lot of these groups care a lot about these bloodlines is because they come from this Erev Rav backgrounds, many of which have a non-human component in them, and they've tried to make these false messianic movements like the Sabbateans and the Frankists, and so many of the leaders of these movements. You look into families. Louis Brandeis, a perfect example of someone from the Frankist Sabbatean bloodline. Marx. A lot of these people, they come from these particular bloodlines that have infiltrated the Jewish community, and who are not pious people. No one should say. I there's a video recently. They said, "Oh, Marx's father, he was a rabbi." He wasn't a rabbi. First of all, he was a meshumid, and not only he was a meshumid, he was an apostate. His apostasy came from pure greed, and that's what influenced Karl Marx into many of his beliefs. Was the apostasy of his father that was purely motivated by greed. What else can we talk about today? There was, I guess I could reiterate some of these issues I mentioned in the previous video about the Erev Rav being shapeshifters and being non-human. Now, that's not to say that we see a dichotomy in how our sages refer to the Erev Rav. Some were very proud of the fact that so many non-Jews converted to Judaism, and Rabbi Victor Miller, for example, said it's the greatest Kiddush Hashem in history. And we find many midrashim and so forth which seem to negate and vilify the Erev Rav. And the answer we could have is quite simple, that the Erev Rav had multiple components in it. The human component we're very proud of and welcome them, and they're 100% good and wonderful people, and it's a tremendous blessing to have them. But then the non-human component, like the Zohar discusses, even though I know some of my friends might question the validity of the Zohar, but I said this in the previous video, but I'm going to say it again just because it might have been lost. The Zohar contains the words negara as a mnemonic device to refer to 5 different species of the Erev Rav that have infiltrated our people. Nephilim, people are familiar with the Nephilim, a lot of YouTube videos about it. Giborim, another race of giants. Anakim, another race of giants, very similar to another word you'll hear on YouTube a lot, Anunnaki. And then Rephaim, another race of giants, well known, and then Amalekim. And Rashi brings in the book of Samuel that the Amalekim were shapeshifters. So there's a lot in these theories. It's not so even someone like David Icke or Ike, I'm not sure. I think it's Icke. His theory, claiming that many members of the secular quote-unquote Jewish elite, or as we explained, they're not Jewish because they're atheist secularists, are actually non-human shapeshifters, and we can find that in the Zohar, evidence toward that. So it's not so strange. It's not quote-unquote anti-Semitic, even though that term, like we mentioned, the thing is, people hear Rothschild and it's like a dog whistle, like, oh, this person is Hitler, this person is that. What you have to learn is that Hitler himself came from this Erev Rav lineage. reason why he never took off his boots was to hide the fact that his feet were reptilian in nature, because he came from this non-human race, a demonic race. He was a hybrid. The term Erev Rav, Erev means mixture. So Erev Rav could be translated, it's usually said the mixed multitude. Rav could be multitude, but could also mean master. Like the word rabbi is Rav. So Erev Rav could mean the hybrid masters, that there are this group of people who are hybrid, part human and part extraterrestrial, part demonic. And we explained that extraterrestrial does not necessarily mean that they came in flying saucers from other planets. It could mean that, but it doesn't only mean that. Angels and demons are also, by definition, extraterrestrial because they're not of this plane of the earth. Another term could be extra-dimensional, meaning they live in other dimensions. They derive from other dimensions, quantum physics theories and so forth. So, and we see many of the Jewish left, they don't look quite as human. When you look at, pious religious Jews, they're generally very beautiful people. And you look at the secular, some of which claim have infiltrated into certain Orthodox communities to a certain extent, but they have a more non-human appearance as well. Among the non-human infiltration, the Erev Rav, these hybrid extraterrestrial, part human, part extraterrestrial beings who have been infiltrated into our society for thousands of years, and caused problems throughout our history. They're the ones who made the golden calf and so forth. And have brought down society throughout history. And, these are the same, the Sabbatean Frankists, these false messianic anti-Christ groups who have, come out throughout history and have brainwashed, large segments of the Jewish community, and still to this day maintain presence and transformed into the other groups, Reform and Zionism and Marxism, and so much of what the left, Hollywood and all of this garbage. Now, and they've influenced many other people as well, and so it's a major problem that we have in society today. But it's not anti-Semitic to point these things out. Like I was addressing this other video, and the irony of, there was recently in Israel this whole issue over a poster in Hungary depicting George Soros, and questions of whether it's anti-Semitic, and then the Israelis came out, but they're like, but we hate George Soros, just don't make it anti-Semitic. And the thing is first of all, so many of their founders were the same type of George Soros, Erev Rav people. The founders of the current Israeli, occupation. And when I say it's occupation, it's not occupied Palestinian territory, it's occupied God's land that's occupied by Zionists. And it's not about lineages. All this talk about, the Ashkenazim are really Khazars and this and that doesn't matter. If they're pious Jews, they are Jews. It doesn't matter if they converted. It's not about lineage, it's not about ancestry. And Khazars, for the most part, have integrated to Jewish society, and it doesn't matter that they don't have a pure Jacobian Israelite lineage, because it doesn't matter. Who cares what their ancestry? All that matters is piety. But the fact of the matter is that God put us in exile, told us not to set up a government in the land until the Messiah comes. And even when the Messiah comes, it's not going to be like this. It's not going to be just that, like, so we have a king and a temple, but we're still going to have, the world operating like this. When the Messiah comes, it's going to be that the powers in heaven, the Kedoshim, the Chol Kedoshim Imo, the holy beings, heavenly beings, the angels, and the pious extraterrestrial beings are going to come to earth and reveal the knowledge of the Lord to the world. That's what Zechariah says, that B'chol Kadosh of Imo, all of his holy beings with him, these angels, these positive and holy extraterrestrial beings who are proclaiming the truth of the one God and teaching the world about this and proving to the world this truth. These are who are going to come and teach us how to live in peace and so forth. And there will be a divine soul that God will send to a king from the line of David for this purpose as well. But it's not just going to be ruling land and making a government, like, just like an Israeli government, but instead of the Knesset will be a king and then they'll build a temple. No, that's very short-sighted. We're looking for total transformation of the world to peace and love, but knowledge of the Lord is the most important thing. That's what Isaiah says, that the knowledge of the Lord will cover the earth as the waters cover the seas. That's what we're looking forward to. Not just a resettlement of a piece of land the size of New Jersey, but rather the whole world will become a beautiful gem in that sense. And the thing is that the powers that be want just the opposite. They want to impose a one world government and one world religion against this idea. And counteracting this idea, this is what is the anti-Messiah movement, what they call in English Antichrist. This is a Jewish idea as well. There is, the Jewish legends refer to an Antichrist figure called Armalus Arasha, the wicked Armalus. He's most likely going to come from Rome. The European Union may have something to do with this. But also this Marxist, and all these type of things in the world. I mean, it's quite shocking how, even though this current Pope, he seems like a really interesting person, really a wonderful person, but then he expresses statements that are Marxist, that are left-wing, and totally against. Oh, how am I supposed to get in here? Let's go around again and see. And so there is possibility of something like this coming from the current Vatican. I don't know. I don't want to insult my Catholic friends and family, because and there are a lot of nice and beautiful things about this Pope, so it's an interesting thing. So how do we strike this balance? All right, there's a lot more to talk about. It might not be him; it might be other powers that be behind him in certain different things. It's a complicated situation. All that being said, we have to have faith in God. We're not going to change everything, but we should be aware of what's going on and not fall into the traps. So there is what to talk about of being aware of what's actually going on in the world without thinking that there's really much we can do about it, but rather we have to pray and hope to God and recognize. And the main thing we can do is, to stand up and make it clear that heretical groups, just because they have Jewish ancestry, do not represent us. That's the message that we really have to get out. That we are not, Israel does not represent the Jewish people, and certainly these other secular, atheistic groups do not represent us. They are not us. And we don't have to feel like, it's not anti-Semitic to point out that people who are not following Judaism are not really Jews, and these people who have brought so much destruction in the world. And like I mentioned, the Gemara says that Israel, that the Jews need the Torah to cure them of the Jewish problem. That's the cure to the Jewish problem. Is Torah, is orthodoxy, and there is a Jewish problem, and the solution is Torah. But another part of the solution is removing the racial aspect of the Jewish identity and welcoming more non-Jews who want to convert into our midst. Thank you for watching. God bless you. Please like, share, and subscribe. And all the best. God bless.